Hello everyone, and welcome to another video where you get to hear my very disgusting voice. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has only had one official tier list since the game released, and that was all the way back in version 7.1. This is because the game is still actively getting patches and tier lists would constantly become outdated. However, that doesn't stop the community from making their own tier lists as the versions go on, so today I will be doing a community average tier list for version 11.0.1. I have divided the Smash fighters into 11 different tiers, although I'd say there are 7 main ones and some of them go into sub-tiers. The tiers that I have are F, E, D, C-, C+, B-, B+, A-, A+, and S. The idea behind the tier splits is that I don't have too many characters piled into one tier. Alright, I've already made the intro too long, so let's just dive right in to the bottom of the tier list. Public opinion on Ganondorf has risen and fallen. At Ultimate's release, hopes were high as some Ganondorf mains such as Verminibus expressed optimism with some comparisons made to his melee self. In addition, Nairo managed to defeat Light with Ganondorf, which also contributed to people believe that Ganondorf was potentially viable or at the very least much better than he was in the previous two games. However, Ganondorf's standing in the metagame has fallen since Ultimate's release due to the issues regarding his gameplay, such as blind spots on his smash attacks, difficulty in approaching, his poor recovery being retained, and most of his matchups still being very poor despite his buffs, such as Pikachu, Greninja, and Mr. Game & Watch. Despite his stepbacks, Ganon has still garnered a good amount of regional results, with a few national results from players such as Litany and Rickles. Ganondorf is also indirectly hurt from patches, as most other potential low-tier characters have received significant buffs, while Ganondorf has received mostly minor changes. Because of this, his competitive reception has become worse as of recent, with most professionals universally believing him to be bottom tier, with some of them considering him to be one of the worst characters in the game. Multiple professionals such as Esam, Mr. R, and Fatality, who use Ganondorf as a secondary, go as far as believing Ganondorf is the worst character in the game. During the early metagame, players had high hopes for Little Mac due to improvements to his notoriously awful recovery and ability to cancel grounded moves. However, Little Mac's changes and the game's mechanics proved to be detrimental to some of his best tools, especially ground game, while his weak aerial game, notoriously the worst in Smash 4, was made even worse. Because of this, opinions on Little Mac dropped significantly, with a consensus believing that he is not only bottom tier, but the worst character in the game. Even in spite of useful buffs and representation from top Little Mac mains, such as Quaz and Karakotori, his cons have largely prevented him from achieving consistent success in the top level of play. Even in the online metagame, Peanut's strong presence in Wi-Fi Warrior rank tournaments have failed to offset his lack of aerial utility and vulnerability to edge guards, represented by Little Mac proceeding to see low representation in national level tournaments. That's actually it for F tier, having this being the tier with the least amount of characters, and that's because these two characters stand out for being awful at the highest level of play. But it's time we move on to E tier. Although his out-of-shield options and damage wrecking capabilities were improved in the transition to Ultimate, Dr. Mario has been consistently perceived as an inferior version of Mario. While Louise, Schroeder, and Locust achieved decent success very early on, his recurring flaws from Smash 4 would remain prominent, as his sluggish speed, atrocious recovery, and mediocre range would only highlight his still poor approach options. However, he does have a few strengths over Mario, such as his out-of-shield game and KO power with back throw and Dr. Tornado. Even with these specific strengths, both of Doc's best players would eventually drop him or relegate him as a secondary in favor of Terry and Fox. Dr. Mario would arguably only get worse throughout subsequent patches, as characters such as Palutena, Samus, and Lucina would continue to hinder him in competitive play. Even with players such as Orion, Fonz, and Tsumusuto achieving notable success with the character, top players such as Mr. R, Samsora, and Dark Wizzy continue to see him as a low-tier character, with some like Esam and Meister viewing him as one of the worst characters in the game. Some people asserted their argument for Doc to connect to Mario as a better version. However, his viability continues to remain questionable. For example, Nairo, Armada, and Leffen now believe Dr. Mario is a mid-tier character due to his intimidating attributes and improved punish game after patch 7.0.0. Esam and MKLeo also believed Dr. Mario's buffs helped him in certain character matchups he struggled with prior, such as their mains Pikachu and Joker respectively. In addition, Goblin views him as a high tier and says that Doc is underrated after 7.0.0 because of his improved combo game and out of shield options. Louise is thinking of picking him back up as a co-main with Fox due to these buffs. Despite these buffs in patch 7.0.0, patches 8.0.0 and 9.0.0 made players say that Dr. Mario is back in low tier. Since more and more characters being buffed and new characters like Min Min and Steve had advantage against him, it's considered hard for Dr. Mario to beat specific characters. Bowser Jr. was initially thought to be one of the worst characters in the game. People immediately noticed that he retained his weaknesses from Smash 4, poor grounded mobility, susceptible to gims, lack of range, and his playstyle being linear. Despite improvements towards his survivability, Clown Cannon, widely agreed to be one of the worst projectiles in Smash 4, and his grab game, many players claimed that the improvements were not significant enough to compensate for his retained weaknesses. As such, Bowser Jr. was considered a low-tier character at best, with some even going as far as claiming as he is a bottom 3 character. Although Bowser Jr. remains a fairly unpopular pick in today's metagame, he has nonetheless achieved noteworthy results from players such as Young Eevee and Ketchup. Notably, Young Eevee placed 2nd at TSEA Link Summer Smash and 7th at Albion 4, with the latter tournament being the highest placement for a Bowser Jr. player at a national tournament. Some professionals have since reevaluated their opinions on him. Esam in particular believes that Bowser Jr. is underrated and has potential to be viable. For now, Bowser Jr.'s viability is debatable, although it is agreed that he's not as poor as he was originally imagined. Donkey Kong was met in the E3 demo build with a degree of cautious optimism. Although players could no longer easily perform the Ding Dong combo, now required much more precise timing, along with similar throw-based kill confirms from Smash 4, Donkey Kong players were willing to do away with this in favor of better frame data, speed, damage, and hitboxes, most notably on his tilts and dash attack, and hoped that he would play differently from Bowser. Though Donkey Kong was considered one of the worst heavyweights from the demo, thought to be only marginally better than Ridley, players were excited for this new Donkey Kong's opportunities in competitive play. Upon the game's release, however, DK fell out of favor very quickly, for a number of reasons. The biggest issue is his low percentage safety. Many of Donkey Kong's moves are punishable on hit at early percents, making his neutral rather egregious in a meta favoring speed and punish games. Although Donkey Kong has been buffed in patches, none of Donkey Kong's biggest flaws were addressed. As a result, in the current metagame, he sees use as an occasional counterpick, but not much beyond that. However, some players have been able to come to terms with his flaws and get impressive results, namely YMCA, Shine, So, DK Will, and Dr. A. Ness. Oh boy. In the early metagame of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, many people have realized that the Mii Sword Fighter had great potential to be a viable character due to having strong frame data, with aerials having the most notable change, better combo tools than from the previous game, and a stronger set of kill confirms in their moveset. This overall led to being considered a high-tier character at best, being the strongest of the Mii fighters. However, as the meta advanced, the viewpoint on the Mii Sword Fighter's opinion has gone down considerably from release. Pros such as Esam have come to believe that while they have such a strong set of kill confirms and projectiles, they possess one of, if not the worst disjoints in the game, and a below average speed for a sword fighter, lackluster throws aside from down throw, and a struggle against rushdown and characters with significantly better disjoints such as Cloud, Lucina, and Roy. Despite this, their strength and results in competitive play have still been well demonstrated thanks to players such as Anonymous Moniker and Zoo, and as a result has been considered a mid-tier character, though this opinion may change as the other Miis have been seeing better success, potentially leaving Mii Sword Fighter as the worst of the 3 Mii fighters. This opinion, however, is still debatable. At the beginning of Ultimate's metagame, many players noticed how despite retaining some of his weaknesses, King Dedede was overall buffed from Smash 4 thanks to his improvements to Garda Throw and stronger KO options, as well as retaining his resilient endurance and disjointed range. This perception would further improve thanks to players such as Zaki and Atomsk, both of whom made notable impacts at major tournaments, with the former placing second at Sumabato SP2 and the latter placing 25th at Pound 2019. As a result, King Dedede became a more popular choice when compared to his Smash 4 incarnation, most notably in local and regional tournaments, and the general perception casted him as an upper mid-tier character with potential to be high-tier. However, as the metagame progressed, updates removing King Dedede's shield break combination and shrinking the Gordo's hitboxes started to hurt his perception. Both Zaki and Atomsk saw a decline in results, while other players either dropped the character in favor of others, Big D, or picked up another character as a co-main, Pelly. Due to the decline, King Dedede's representation has significantly dropped, with some players reconsidering him to be strictly mid-tier character or in some instances a low-tier character. In addition, King Dedede's poor disadvantaged state, inconsistent KO potential, and laggy frame data have caused him to struggle against most top-tier and high-tier characters, including Palutena, Mega Man, and Fox. Although King Dedede is widely considered to be better than his previous incarnation, his true viability in Ultimate remains to be seen. At the start of Ultimate, Incineroar is considered a mid-tier by most professionals, with access to moves that have the potential to deal high knockback and damage thanks to Revenge, a powerful back throw that can potentially KO earlier than Ness's, and a suicide KOing option in the form of Cross Chop, which can be performed out of a down throw. It also had a decent amount of success from players, especially Magister, who placed well in both regional and national tournaments. Despite this, as the metagame progressed, Incineroar's representation has been noticeably limited overall, with below-average results at major tournaments. Magister also started attending less tournaments while placing worse at the tournaments he did attend. Although Incineroar has received buffs in its combo potential and power balancing in its poor recovery, it continues to have poor representation with few notable results, and most professionals currently consider it a low-tier or bottom-tier character. Upon Ultimate's release, many players noted King K. Rool's numerous strengths that were never seen before on a super heavyweight character, namely 2 projectiles, unique belly armor mechanic, a down throw that, in theory, leads to very early kill confirms, good startup on many moves, and a very long-ranged recovery. This, in addition to his other strengths more typical to his weight class, caused the majority of top professionals to consider King K. Rool a potential high or even top-tier character, while also getting a notorious reputation of being broken among less experienced players. However, it quickly became apparent that King K. Rool wasn't nearly as good as players thought, as he has some of the nastiest downsides in the game to counter his strengths. This includes a gigantic hurtbox, a flawed disadvantage state, and high end lag on his moves to offset their unchallengeable startup. He also has various exploitable mechanics on many of his strengths, such as an extremely slow and predictable recovery, laggy projectiles, and belly super armor being breakable. His down throw is also easy to mash out until higher percents, rendering seemingly broken kill confirms not true until higher percents. While he can use mash deterrence and reads to game the system, they are inconsistent by nature, often making early kills somewhat uncommon and risky. Compounding this, King K. Rool received nerfs in 2.0.0 that made his already negative perception even worse than before at that time, even though they turned out not to matter as much as players thought. Because of these factors, almost every top professional saw him as one of the worst characters in the game within months, which is especially notorious among Japanese players, many of which considered him to be the single worst character in the game. King K. Rool later received small but helpful buffs in patch 3.0.0, although they weren't significant enough to address his significant flaws, and his competitive representation remained poor. Nevertheless, it improved his representation. While still typically ranked very low, players such as Ben Gold, Kirby Kid, and Muck began to earn results that made people question his reputation as a low-tier character, which was evident when Ben Gold managed to win Battle Arena Melbourne 11, an Australian B-tier tournament, with solo King K. Rool. He would then receive more impactful buffs later on in multiple patches. Patch 6.0.0 further shifted players' opinions to a more positive side as it alleviated some of his weaknesses. Some top players still viewed him rather lowly, with many Japanese top professionals still viewing him as the single worst character in the game. However, some Western top players shifted into a more positive view. Some of them, such as ESAM and MVD, went so far to say that King K. Rool was not a low tier, but a mid-tier character instead. Patch 8.0.0, which arguably brought K. Rool his most significant buffs, caught more attention as the changes to both Belly Super Armor and Crown Rang's armor, especially the latter, give him new options to alleviate his poor disadvantage state, and his improvements to his already good grab game and dash attack has given him more consistent KO potential. Because of this, even more top professional players have shifted their opinion to a more positive side, stating that K. Rool might finally have some potential. DeBuzz goes as far as say that K. Rool is a high mid-tier character, and some Japanese players, such as Raito, who considered him to be the worst character in the game, have stated that K. Rool might be a lot more threatening. How much better he is after all the patches, as well as his true viability, however, remains to be seen. Some of his fatal flaws are still present even after numerous buffs, often demanding a secondary pick for his worst matchups. Before release, players were quick to note that the Ice Climbers lost their most powerful tool from Brawl, their infamous 0-to-death chain grab. That, along with changes to gameplay mechanics removing several combo tools, caused players to believe that the Ice Climbers wouldn't be viable, a belief that held on throughout the early metagame. As such, the Ice Climbers' representation was minuscule. It wasn't until a few months after Ultimate's release that the Ice Climbers' player base started to make breakthroughs, with the few that stuck with them discovering new decent setups and high damaging combos. This allowed the Ice Climbers to gain better representation as the metagame progressed, with Kai using them as a co-main in Japan. Most notably, Big D picked up the Ice Climbers and was able to place well at a national level. Despite the success, many players believe that the character's playstyle is too complicated for them to be viable, and the general consensus agrees that the Ice Climbers are on the lower end of mid-tier at best and low-tier at worst. The new advanced techniques, however, have helped their mains with how little matchup experience there has been from opponents to learn from. And that's it for E tier. These characters I would still consider bad, but not as awful to the level of Mac and Ganon. Well, it's time to move on to D tier. Despite having received noticeable attention due to its unexpected inclusion, Piranha Plant's representation has been low at tournaments. This is due to its noticeably susceptibility to combos, as well as subpar mobility and approach options. In spite of its versatile projectile and recovery, many professionals consider Piranha Plant to be a low mid-tier character. Piranha Plant's representation improved around the summer of 2019 thanks to dedicated mains such as Brood, Lucky, and Greward, placing well at national tournaments. Brood in particular has brought forth more discussion over the character's true viability as a result of placing second at Umabura SP4. In addition, Isam put out a video where he reconsiders Piranha Plant standing, believing that it is now a mid-tier character. In the current meta, however, Brood has dropped Piranha Plant in favor of Banjo and Kazooie, leaving Piranha Plant's representation relatively stagnant once again, even with previous updates giving numerous buffs. As a result, Piranha Plant's current standing in the meta is up to debate. Since the release of Ultimate, many professionals immediately noticed Kirby's significant flaws from the previous installment have been retained, in spite of the mechanics suiting him better in comparison to Super Smash Bros. 4. As a result, his representation in regionals and nationals has been minimal, with his reception being negative across the community. Players noted his vulnerability to being camped, poor range, slow airspeed, as well as platforms potentially negating all follow-ups. Should he start a combo with forward throw? Throughout Ultimate's metagame, many considered him to be low or even bottom tier, with some going as far as putting him as the worst character in the game due to these weaknesses and his sparse results and representation outside of locals. Patches 6.0.0 and 8.0.0 eventually gave Kirby some of his biggest improvements. Some of his aerial attacks gained more KO power and versatility. His ability to follow up on platforms was partially restored, and he gained additional options for kill confirms. His results have been noticeably improved as well, with players such as Jesus Jock, I probably butchered that, and Ferret Kuma placing well at both regional and national levels, with the former defeating Gluttony. Because of these improvements, his perception has improved enough that he is often considered a mid-tier character. Some players have also recognized niche top-tier matchups Kirby can evade thanks to his strong close quarters combat game and crouch, noticeably Palutena and Fox. When Isabelle was first revealed, there was a glimmer of hope for the character due to her similar neutral and campy patient playstyle with Villager. On release, she was considered to be generally effective as she shared some abilities with Villager. Her slingshot was considered a good option for zoning and or approaching and edge guarding, and her pocket prevented camping from other zoners. Her unique tools were also considered. Lloyd Trap functioned as an effective tool for stage control and could also force reactions from her opponent or set up an aerial combo, while Fishing Rod became rather notorious for dealing with recoveries and being rather difficult to deal with, especially at lower skill levels. However, Isabelle's representation quickly dropped off after the first few months, with players considering her not as good of a character as initially imagined. In addition to sharing the same weaknesses as Villager, Isabelle has additional flaws that hinder her, such as her infamously short smash attacks, while her camping game does not benefit as much to Ultimate's engine. As a result of these factors, Isabelle has not made a significant impact in tournaments and has little representation throughout Ultimate's current metagame. This is also exacerbated by the fact she is outshined by her original counterpart, Villager, who is also struggling in the meta with limited representation despite being considered a better character than her. Due to Villager's stronger presence and Isabelle's weaknesses, numerous professionals view her as one of the worst characters in the game. On the other hand, a few other players believe the character is underrated and has potential due to her strong camping game and effective ledge tools. Furthermore, dedicated players such as Neri Kept in Level 1 use her as either a solo main or a secondary and have placed well at both regional and national levels. Finally, Update 4.0.0 gave her several buffs to her moveset, including her neutral attacks Wobble technique, which traps the opponent at the ledge with the jab until kill percent. As of now, her true tournament viability and tier placement in the meta is still questionable. Ever since the beginning of the metagame, opinions on Jigglypuff's viability have been rather low, with most players considering the character to be low tier at best. This is because although Jigglypuff was moderately improved in its transition from Smash 4, it still held exploitable weaknesses carried over from the previous game, with some players arguing that its matchup spread, neutral game, and KO options remain poor. Even after receiving buffs in patch 6.0.0, and despite the efforts of players such as Erika, Bass Mage, and Hungrybox, Jigglypuff continues to see low representation and a slow developing metagame both offline and online compared to other low-tier characters. Nevertheless, most people agree that Jigglypuff is far superior to its iteration in Smash 4, where it was considered the worst character in the game for much of the game's lifespan. Ever since the beginning of Ultimate's metagame, Bayonetta has hardly had any success in tournaments. This is largely due to many of her player base and top players dropping her in favor of other characters as a result of her nerfs. Bayonetta has widely been considered to be a high-effort, low-reward character, as she has to work significantly harder to win neutral, rack up damage, and close out stocks than a vast majority of the cast. The changes to her have caused top players to have very negative opinions on her, with many players regarding her as an unviable character that isn't worth the effort. In subsequent patches, Bayonetta received many buffs that made her strongest options more consistent. One of the patches, 8.0.0, was a direct change towards her character base. With her somewhat relevant moves being a bit better, it's likely that her tools are now better overall. Players have considered her to be a mid-tier character. This is the biggest change from the former low-bottom tier character perspective. On top of this, players like Lima and Geist continue to use her to moderate success. Both of these have allowed her perception to be better than before. However, she is still considered to be marginally a shell of her former self and continues to have a truncated representation in the current metagame. Compared to other characters transitioned from Smash 4, which saw them receive considerable buffs and drew the attention of competitive players, Robin did not receive nearly as much attention. While some of Robin's moves were buffed, some of their reliable moves from Smash 4 were toned back, with their neutral at the start of the match taking a temporary yet significant hit by not allowing them immediate access to Levin's sword. Additionally, despite Robin's average airspeed and above average air acceleration being nearly akin to Marth, their lackluster ground mobility presents liabilities, as the speed increases Robin received were too given to much faster characters in the transition. While Robin certainly does possess potent and powerful tools in the right hands, most professionals did not deem them very notable on early tier lists. Arcfire's newfound utility in place of their checkmate confirms left ambiguity in functionality, where initial attention was passed over in favor of already perceivably stronger characters to which he shares attributes of resource-reliant zoning: Olimar, trapping, Pac-Man, and sword spacing, Ike, rendering Robin in comparatively low positions. Perceptions of Robin have increased somewhat since then, as Robin players have achieved some success with the character. Players such as Mewtwo and J-Tails see Robin as underrated in the current metagame. All the while, Robin's viability past mid-tier is still up for debate due to sparse activity and low travel among the best of their player base, on top of low visibility in particular regions. Much like the other Mii fighters, the Mii Gunner was perceived lukewarmly on release due to the improvements to their moveset. While the severe nerfs to their mobility were noted, along with the loss of their more infamous camping tools, most notably a shorter forward aerial, weaker gunner missiles, and the nerfs to grenade launch, the buffs to their other moves more than made up for it, as it improved a majority of attacks that were lackluster in Smash 4, such as forward smash, up air, and their throws. Overall, they are considered a relatively average zoner type character. Despite this, the Gunner was one of the most obscure characters in competitive play in the early metagame. Both the Gunner and the Brawler were overshadowed by the extremely positive perception of the Mii Sword Fighter, who took the most of the Mii Fighter's representation overall. While it was relatively difficult to find Gunner users in the first year of Ultimate's competitive lifespan, interest in the character took an unprecedented turn upon the release of the Sans Mii Fighter costume, which caused representation of the character to skyrocket for some time. Despite this, the Mii Gunner has not made much of an impact in the competitive scene, with only a few notable users achieving lukewarm results, such as Katakiri, Dion, and Protom. Professionals usually agree that the Gunner is significantly outclassed by other zoners with similar playstyles, such as Samus and Simon. While their current standing in the metagame is still debatable, the Mii Gunner is typically considered the least effective of the Mii fighters of the three, or on par with the Mii Brawler at most. That's it for D tier. I would consider these characters not good, but definitely have potential. We will be moving on to C- tier, but I will give a full opinion on the tier at the end of C+. When Simon and his extra fighter Richter were revealed on August 8, 2018, there was considerable hype for them due to their showcase strengths, including extremely high reach, an array of powerful projectiles, and ledge trapping potential. When the game released on December Some players viewed the Belmonts as a high tier, or potentially a top tier character because of their spacing and zoning ability, allowing them to play an effective defensive game. Simon and Richter were notable counter picks for certain characters that struggled with range due to their spacing and keep away game. However, their weaknesses were soon discovered to be prominent, with a notoriously poor recovery due to situational recovery moves alongside low airspeed, inconsistency in KOing, average frame data, poor mobility, and high skill ceiling. Thus, their results and viability dropped, with some players such as Mewtwo King, Esam, and Armada relegating them to mid-tier or low-high tier. Simon in particular was considerably overshadowed by Richter in terms of tournament representation, though this was due to players' aesthetic preferences rather than any differences between them. However, many players would later drop Richter, and Simon would eventually gather more results from players such as Trigger, Cherry, and Pre-Cooked Bread. Though Simon has a noticeably better position in the metagame as time progressed, both characters' official tier placement remains unknown. When Ultimate was released, many players believed Meta Knight to be a strong character. This was due to his outstanding recovery, great frame data, and great mobility. Due to the smaller characters getting emphasized more, Meta Knight had better matchups against fighters who struggled against short characters such as Wii Fit Trainer. Because of this, many players considered Meta Knight as a solid high-tier character who was not as strong or broken as his Brawl counterpart, but just as, if not better than his Smash 4 counterpart. Unfortunately, as the meta advanced, players recognized the exploitable weaknesses of Meta Knight: his terrible endurance, watered-down punish game, lack of effective finishers outside of forward smash, below average damage output, poor range compared to other sword fighters like Cloud, and moves unsafe on block. This resulted in him becoming worse than initially imagined, with many professionals calling him a mid-tier or low-tier character. Despite of this, he has amassed a respectable player base and has gathered notable results from players such as Jay, Abadango, Slither2 Hunter, Bonk, and Ye. Several major players now believe Meta Knight to be lower mid-tier character. Duck Hunt's true viability has remained unknown by many since the beginning of the metagame. Since Ultimate's game mechanics encouraged more aggressive gameplay, many players thought that the duo fared worse than they did in Smash 4. However, Duck Hunt's competitive reception has improved as the metagame progressed. Many players agree that Duck Hunt have improved considerably overall thanks to their buffs, making them more capable at playing aggressively. Although Duck Hunt's camping gameplay is generally agreed to be the worse than it was in Smash 4, it nevertheless remains a viable strategy for them to fall back on if need be. So far, Duck Hunt have achieved great results thanks to players such as ASA, Wisdom, White Girl 69, and especially Raito. However, like in Smash 4, Duck Hunt remained mediocre representation in spite of their respectable results. Although it is unknown what their true viability will be posited at, the general consensus is that they are mid-tier. Wii Fit Trainer was generally considered to be a mid-tier character upon Ultimate's release, but public opinion of the character has gradually improved as the character has received notable buffs in multiple balance patches, particularly in updates 3.0.0 and 8.0.0. Additionally, the character has performed relatively well at the regional level, as players such as Valrun, John Numbers, Evi, and more have ranked highly on their respective power rankings throughout Ultimate's lifetime. There have also been several breakout performances on the international stage. Multiple Wii Fit Trainer players have placed 33rd at S-tier tournaments, and a number of top players have lost to Wii Fit Trainer players in bracket. Because of this combination of relatively consistent buffs and ever-improving tournament results, public opinion of Wii Fit Trainer's viability has steadily risen over time, and many now consider the character to be a fringe high tier. Despite this, some are still dubious of the character's potential, as Wii Fit Trainer still has a few glaring weaknesses that sometimes result in extremely polarizing matchups. Nonetheless, the character is expected to see a higher level of success once regular tournaments return after the current pandemic. Being a widely requested character, there was a lot of hype when Ridley was first announced to be playable. However, initial expressions on Ridley's viability in the E3 demo build were very negative. Due to him having the largest hurt box in the game while also not being as heavy as other super heavyweights, along with his attacks suffering from high startup and end lag, many people claim that Ridley's disadvantaged state was too risky for him to make a significant impact towards the meta. As such, he was initially considered to be low or even bottom tier character. However, when the game was released, Ridley achieved notable successes despite having low representation, thanks to impressive results from players such as Nair, Overlaid, Adam, Vravus. Nair in particular placed second at Mexican Gaming Championship with a notable win over Dark Wizzy, as well as fifth at Smash Fest to the Sky. This led to the most professionals to reevaluate their opinions on Ridley, stating that he's high risk, high reward, which is indicated by Ridley's excellent advantage state, where he can utilize his range, speed, and power to provide him a strong and versatile neutral game, though mistakes can lead to his poor disadvantage state, which shows his relatively high learning curve. Overall, Ridley's reception is significantly better than initially thought, as he is no longer considered to be a low tier, proving that he can be very potent once mastered. In the early metagame, players noted that changes to the game mechanics, which increases the pace of the game and encourages more aggressive gameplay over camping, harmed Villager, since most characters that once struggled against his camping gameplay can now get through it much easier. Furthermore, other camping characters that were once considered to be inferior to Villager, such as Mega Man, Pac-Man, and Duck Hunt, received noticeable buffs and benefits from the game mechanics. As such, Villager suffered from minimal representation, and players considered him to be a lower mid or low tier character. Despite this, thanks to the efforts of players such as Panda Bear and Kept, some players have acknowledged Villager's strengths and believe that it prevents him from falling too far behind. As such, Villager's current viability remains questionable. Banjo and Kazooie were initially met with a mildly positive reception due to their strong flexible moves such as forward air, forward tilt, smash attacks, Wonder Wing, and rear egg, their ability to zone and edge trap effectively, and their versatile recovery. Their viability was strengthened with Tweak's 5th place at Glitch 7 minus World. However, the duo's flaws, including their below average speed, problems with juggling and scoring KOs, decent lag on their moves, and a barely adequate grab game, quickly became a problem. Despite their flaws and Tweak dropping the fighter almost immediately after Glitch 7, opinions on Banjo-Kazooie's viability remained somewhat positive, as Banjo-Kazooie garnered a sizable player base that included Huto, Raito, and Trela. The latter defeated Void at the Big House 9. As a result, the consensus among professionals such as Music King and ESAM was that the fighter was between mid-tier and the lower end of high tier. However, ever since the end of 2019, Banjo-Kazooie have seen a decline in both results and reception, with several players such as the Affirmation 3 drop the fighter. Many players believe that they are only at their strongest in an online environment, while others believe that they are low tier overall. Currently, while Banjo and Kazooie are generally respected as a fighter, their viability as a solo main is widely disputed due to their competitive results being quite lacking compared to metagame relevant fighters. At the beginning of Ultimate's lifespan, Pit was seen as a character who had improved significantly from Smash 4 with the universal increased mobility, landing lag reduction, and all aerials, and new KO moves fixing many of his core problems from the previous game. However, Pit's representation in the current stage of Ultimate has significantly dwindled due to how straightforward he is. Professional players believe Pit lacks an explosive factor in his kit, especially when compared to the cast, most of which gain significant game-changing buffs. Even characters considered less viable than him, such as Little Mac and Isabelle, showcase more polarized but notable strengths, while Pit was deemed as fundamentals-based, low-reward fighter. This has perpetuated his archetype as an honest character with average capabilities all around. Due to this, professionals such as Mutaking, Samsora, ESAM, and Armada have labeled Pit as low tier, or even bottom tier in Mutaking's case, due to other characters outshining him in his and his Echo Fighter, Dark Pit. Changes as of patch 8.0 have yielded a wind of optimism in the character, considering Mars and Dabuz have speculated high tier status, the latter of whom expressing interest in using Pit in a serious manner. Without a stronger player base, however, it is debatable where Pit's viability truly lies. In the meanwhile, dedicated players such as Kiraflax and Lucky continue to achieve great results with Pit. After a while, however, Kiraflax has mostly stopped playing the game in turn of content creation and plays Rob more than Pit. Steadily, there are more players in the competitive scene that are getting results like Oracion and Raze and others. This is the divider between C- and C+. Like I said before, I will give my overall opinion on the tier as a whole after I talk about the C+ characters. You probably noticed that we're near the end of the video. That's because I'm going to split this video up into 3 parts, occurring around the first Sunday in each month. Smash Ultimate's 81 characters are way too much for me to talk about in one video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and hope you have an amazing day. Bye!